Hey guys, first regardsman here, and so I'll be talking about every single melee weapon in Space Marine 2 patch 11.0 and tier listing them. Now, I will not be talking about the heroic weapons in this video. I'll probably make like a tier list for those at a later date, but for now we'll be going over the relic tier options, starting off with the Chainsword. Now, the Chainsword has been a top tier weapon for melee options since the game came out pretty much. The horde control on this thing is quite good. Bash and Stomp have been pretty decent at dealing with Minora's hordes like forever. Zangors and Hormigons do get stomped out. The CHP recovery on this is very good thanks to the perk Swift Recovery. It gives you 100% more contested health recovery on heavy attacks, and really with the Chainsword, even without the heroic version, you do like 99% heavy attacks anyways. The light attacks are a little weak on this, but pretty good at setting up gun strikes and stuff like that. You know, there's not too much to say about the Chainsword because it is a pretty basic weapon, but the weapon is still very functional. It is a great option on every single class it is on, and I think this one is definitely better than the combat knife is currently for classes like Tactical and the Vanguard. So Chainsword, I think, is a solid A tier weapon. The only thing I don't like about this weapon is the fact that it doesn't really have a ranged option of any kind. Most of these actually have a ranged option, like the Power Fist, Power Axe, Power Sword, and even the Thunder Hammer can hit Zoanthropes with like proper placement. This one really struggles to do that without a Stomp, and even then the Stomp is way worse since they like, you know, a Power Rake on a Power Sword. But overall, Chainsword's a very strong weapon and definitely goes into the A tier. I think it's like a really good spot for it. Next weapon we have here is the Thunder Hammer. Now, the Thunder Hammer used to be the worst melee weapon in the entire game. They have buffed this thing quite a bit. In patch 11.0, they also fixed up the Aftershock improved attack to actually get bonuses from the Overcharge perk on both slams, so it feels way better. And in patch 10, or was like patch 9, they actually like buffed up the AoE on this thing as well. So the AoE is very strong in the Thunder Hammer currently, really good at wiping out Chaos Spawn, really good at wiping out pretty much any warrior in your face. It does do a lot of damage. The issue I have with the Thunder Hammer is that, first of all, the CHP recovery, like across the board for melee weapons in Space Marine 2, is just not very good, or at least not where it should be. Saber Interactive has stated they will be swapping that around at some point in time. That is a bug, but for now, the melee weapon CHP recovery is just not great, and the Thunder Hammer definitely suffers from that. On top of that, this weapon is quite slow for this game. Like, this game will lock you down all the time. Stun locks are really devastating in Space Marine 2, and having this weapon charged up behind a corner is like the best way to pull off Aftershocks, but Aftershock is very strong when you do properly pull it off, and the Thunder Hammer is definitely a powerful weapon. I just don't think it's quite in the A tier currently. I would put it like a high B. I think it's a good weapon, you know, the Thunder Hammer Aftershock, the Thunder Hammer Ground Slam, Seismic Chain, these are all very good weapon attacks. The AoE will absolutely crater enemies like Tyranids and stuff like that. When it comes to fighting bosses like a Carnifex or a Hellbrute, this one can struggle, especially without the block version, because without Stagger, the Thunder Hammer will just get knocked around occasionally. That's like my biggest issue with weapons like this, is that you do just kind of get stun locked all the time on super slow options in this game, and this one definitely suffers from that the most. Next weapon here is the Power Sword. Now, the Power Sword is just an amazing weapon in this game. I think this one is like on par with the Chainsword for sure, if not above. The Power Rake is an amazing attack. The amount of range you actually get on a melee weapon with this is incredible. You know, if we do talk about the Xenophase Blade option for a split second here, that one can even like cut Neurothropes out of the sky very easily, but even the base Power Sword can do that. Power Rake did get buffed like way back when, and since then, I do think the Power Sword has kind of like overtaking the Chainsword a bit here. The biggest issue with this weapon versus the Chainsword is that the CHP recovery on this is way better thanks to Swift Recovery, and the AoE can be better at times for things like heavy attacks and shoulder bash. But overall, the Power Sword does have an amazing AoE. It has great attacks for Zoanthropes and Neurothropes. It does a ton of damage, great horde control, and even though it does lack that CHP recovery, it does pretty much everything else solid. So I would say it's definitely in the A tier. I would put it a little above the Chainsword, to be honest, because being able to cut down Zoanthropes out of the sky, being able to knock over these Zangors and things like that, it's just a little bit better on this weapon, in my opinion, than the Chainsword. And Power Whirl is also a very powerful attack, and the Block Power Sword is one of my favorite weapons in this game. Next up, we have the Combat Knife. Now, the Combat Knife I feel like it has been power crept a lot. There's not a lot this weapon does that the Chainsword, Power Sword, and even the Thunder Hammer don't do. The AoE on this weapon is not very good at all. It is primarily a single target weapon, which is why Shadow Stab is like the most notable attack on this entire thing. Shadow Stab is a good ability on the combat knife. Like if you're building a tactical ambush on a sniper, it is quite strong. The single target damage is very high, but to be honest, all the other weapons are pretty good at dealing single target damage even without a perk like Shadow Stab, and they also have great AoE on top of that. I would say the combat knife is like a last pick for me on most of the classes it's on, and if I had a different option on the sniper, I'd probably pick something else as well. So I would put it in like B tier. You know, if we were to talk about the heroic variant with the Power Gladius, that would probably go up to S because the Power Gladius does hit like an absolute truck with the Agile Strike ability, but even like the base combat knife with block charges, I don't think it's bad by any means, which is why it's going in B tier. I just don't think it's quite as good as some of the other options. You know, maybe you put it higher, but let me know in the comments below. Next weapon we have is the Power Axe. The Power Axe is the big winner of patch 11.0. This weapon went up in the tier list tremendously this time. Now, some versions of this weapon were already best in slot in like patch 10.0, but now the Block Axe has access to power stance. They've also moved around the perk tree so you can access things like Tactical Retreat and Power Wave simultaneously. And they have also made it so on top of all of that, the overhead strike out of power stance can be accessed as like a base feature of the moveset for this weapon, so like building a perk into it. So all of those things have helped it out tremendously. It feels way better to use. I think this is by far the most entertaining weapon in the game currently. Power Wave will also get extra damage off of perks like Overcharge. It also has like the best scaling with Shield Bash. And if you look at like the top two weapons in Space Marine 2 with the Power Axe and Power Fist currently, the Power Axe is just way more entertaining out of the two weapon options here, and I would just easily put this in S. I'm gonna put the top of S, to be honest, because the Power Fist is definitely going to be an S tier as well, because this weapon is fucking ludicrous. It is kind of insane how good the Power Fist actually is, but it's fucking boring. That's the best way I can put it. This weapon is fucking boring. I know it's not really the criteria for the best weapon ever. If we're talking about straight up power levels, I would put the Power Fist in S over the Power Axe, because being able to double charge one shot a Majoris and like every single Majoris behind that guy on top of the boss, on top of the Zoanthrope, and one shot all of those dudes, yeah, that is kind of broken. That is still better than the Power Axes in my opinion. And also like the CHP recovery on this is pretty decent as well compared to the Power Axe, because the Power Axe CHP recovery is like okay, and the animation locking on this is pretty brutal. The Power Fist can be too, but you can break out the charge attacks of this weapon pretty easily, like a dodge and stuff like that, and also on the Bulwark. But the Power Axe really does lock you down tremendously with things like Whirlwind, so I would put the Power Fist above for that reason. But the fact that the Power Axe is overperforming to a similar degree on any build is pretty incredible, on top of the fact that it is just way more fun than this weapon is, in my opinion. I really do hope going forward all the melee weapons in Space Marine 2 do follow the Power Axe trajectory of being fun and powerful. The Omnisaya Axe is coming out next year in like February or March, probably get a PTS before that for the Tech Marine, and I hope that one's very powerful as well, and hopefully the other weapons do get buffed to like not get totally power crept by these two. They did talk about the Power Fist getting nerfed. This weapon is kind of deserving a nerf here. The Power Axe I think is in a pretty good spot. Maybe they'll nerf like the Power Wave damage a little bit, but overall I think they're all in like a pretty good spot at the moment. I think the biggest issue I have with Space Marine 2's balance is like some variants suck, more so than like the weapons overall blowing ass, and I would say melee weapon balance across the board is generally better at the moment than the ranged weapon balance is, because like some ranged weapons are just way better than others. Like, I mean, you could say that for the Power Fist, but the Power Fist is like one weapon that's kind of like out there. They talk about nerfing this one anyways. Like, they are aware this is like an outlier, but if you look at the ranged weapons, the outliers are just way more numerous than this one, and not just because you have like, you know, 10 times as many ranged weapons, but even with that in mind, the melee weapon balance I think is just a little bit closer. And the Power Axe, definitely a winner of this patch. Let me know what you guys think about this weapon in the comments below, and let me know what you guys think about your overall tier list for the melee weapons in this game. I know a lot of people love the Power Sword in this game, and a lot of people love the Chainsword. I know people want the Thunder Hammer to be a god tier weapon. You know, maybe when they buff up the CHP recovery in this game, this weapon will go like way up to S in like the tier list here. I think like a big thing holding this weapon back in general is that the Thunder Hammer is suffering from the fact that Space Marine 2 has such a like parry system that locks you in all the time. There are so many things in Space Marine 2 that just literally force you to move. If Minotaurus is going to jump at you to grab you, you have no option but to move. And like that's a big issue for a charge attack weapon in this game. The Power Fist cares a little bit less because this thing can shoot out like Rocket Fist from 20 meters away. This one forces you to go within like, 5 to 10 meters of a range attack, even with the AoE attack increase they did. And overall, I do hope that like one day they buff up that or like change how the stun locks work in Space Marine 2, because like that is really what's holding back the melee weapons on top of the CHP. And once they take a look at that or like properly rework the system, they should feel a lot better. But for now, I think they're in a pretty decent spot considering all of that. But that's pretty much all I have to say in this one, guys. Let me know what your tier list is below. Which weapon is your favorite, and which one do you think is the most fun? I feel like people don't really talk about that a lot, about like not everything in a video game is about being a meta slave. But when we talk about a tier list, all a tier list is just talking about like what weapon can do the most at a peak performance. All a meta weapon in any video game is a force multiplier for players' skill. So you really don't have to just play with like one type of weapon. You don't have to spam Power Fist. You don't have to spam Power Axe, but you probably should because this weapon is really fucking fun. But either way, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Bye.